Some breaking news out of Italy. All of Italy is now on lockdown. All of Italy is now on lockdown over the coronavirus. Italy's Prime Minister making the announcement at a news conference just minutes ago.
Italy, the government banning travel for about a quarter of the population and canceling many public gatherings nationwide. And for the first time, look at this, Pope Francis live streaming his Sunday prayer, hoping to keep away large crowds. More than 360 people have now died of the coronavirus in Italy, the most outside of China, and nearly 1,500 new cases were reported just in the past 24 hours.
The news of another spike in coronavirus cases in Italy this weekend kept many off the streets of Milan, a city at the heart of territory now in lockdown. Fear is real here and across huge swathes of northern Italy, worst hit by the virus. After a week when the government implemented increasingly strict measures, now the Lombardy region and 14 provinces are sealed off from the rest of the nation.
To bring you the latest from Italy, this is the Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte speaking. We are just hearing that Prime Minister Conte saying that there will no longer be this red zone in the north of the country. All of Italy is now going to be under the same condition. All of Italy now, in effect, quarantined. Prime Minister Conte saying people should not move other than for work and emergencies. That means that the whole country is in lockdown. He says all public gatherings will be banned now.
In Venice, one of the affected cities, tourists were largely absent from the normally bustling areas. All major gatherings will be halted under the new restrictions. Gyms, museums, ski resorts ordered to close. Weddings and funerals will be stopped as part of the measures, which will last until early April. But the virus is impacting daily life outside of the lockdown area. At masses in Rome, people sat a metre apart from each other. And visitors were thin on the ground outside the Vatican, which has reported its own case of the virus.
I am close in prayer to people who are suffering because of the current coronavirus epidemic and to all those taking care of them.
There had been worries for the Pope himself after he cancelled a retreat because of illness, but the Vatican said he simply had a common cold.
We understand that all these measures will create inconveniences. We understand that these measures will impose sacrifices, sometimes small and sometimes very large. But this is a time where we must take responsibility for ourselves. We need to understand that all of us need to adhere to the measures. We shouldn't think that we're more clever than that.
Tonight, after nearly a week adrift, in isolation and without answers, finally an end in sight.
Agreement has been reached to bring our ship into the port of Oakland.
The Grand Princess is expected to dock Monday. Already 21 people are positive for coronavirus, including 19 crew members, thousands still untested. Tomorrow in Oakland, California, those passengers will be transferred to 4 military bases, 2 in California, 1 in Texas, and 1 in Georgia, where they will be screened, tested, and quarantined for 2 weeks. Passengers say it's been miserable.
It's kind of like being in a little prison cell at sea.
Oh, we are not allowed out of our room at all.
For Gina Pilata and Mike Nicky, being trapped on board is a matter of life or death.
My husband is actually, as of today, running out of his diabetic medications.
In Oakland, worry from residents as news spreads that the ship is coming in.
It's going to just have the whole Bay Area scrambling at this point. That's going to wake everybody up. I think it's going to be a tough situation.
Off the coast of South Florida, another cruise liner stuck at sea while officials test 2 crew members and another in Egypt quarantined with Americans on board. Today, a member of President Trump's coronavirus task force with this urgent warning.
If you're a person with an underlying condition, and you are particularly an elderly person with an underlying condition, you need to think twice about getting on a plane on a long trip. And not only think twice, just don't get on a cruise ship.
In Italy tonight, 16 million people in the country's hot zone now in lockdown. That's more than a quarter of its population under quarantine. with cases soaring to more than 7,000 infected and 366 deaths, a 30% spike overnight, the most fatalities outside of China. Travel in and out of 14 northern provinces restricted until April, including the city of Venice, a tourist favorite, and the massive Lombardy region, home to fashion capital Milan. An eerie quiet in both cities' iconic sites on Sunday, but overnight, panic at this train station. Passengers desperate to escape, fearful trains would be shutting down. Weddings and funerals postponed, ski resorts, gyms, and malls closed. Visitors banned from the Vatican Museum, Pope Francis praying for the victims of the epidemic through live stream, sealed off from worshippers. Then, surprising a few pilgrims with a quick wave from his balcony over St. Peter's Square. Tonight, the unprecedented quarantine winning praise from the WHO, its chief calling it a courageous step to protect the Italian people.
Remote brain surgery in China. The patient was in a Beijing hospital, the neurosurgeon 3,000 kilometers away in the southern island province of Hainan. The live images and medical data were transmitted by an ultra-fast 5G wireless network with video conferencing and other technology from Huawei. This is just the latest example of the game-changing use of new super-fast 5G networks. Europe also wants to use the technology, but is facing a problem. Huawei is one of the main producers of 5G hardware, but the company is said to be too close to the Chinese government. Apart from unconfirmed allegations of espionage, there are concerns that Huawei technology could pose a security risk if it were used in sensitive infrastructure in Europe. We have to recognize that China is also pursuing its strategic interests through economic policy. So we mustn't be naive when it comes to important infrastructure projects like the awarding of 5G licenses.
Thousands of Americans die each year from completely preventable gun crimes. And some say that is due to laws that were created back in the 80s that limit the ATF's ability to use technology. One organization says they have a very close look at these laws and have come up with an artificial intelligence solution that will not violate any laws currently on the books. And what's more, they say it would dramatically increase the ATF's ability to catch criminals and save lives. Tell me about the concept of using AI to help prevent criminals from their guns, or at least linking them to them once the crime is committed.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, when you buy a firearm, you have to fill out a form. It's called a 4473. And the serial number of the gun you purchase, it's engraved into the gun, is added to that form. That form at some point may end up at the National Trade Center, which is owned by the ATF, okay? They have 700 million of these forms stored there. Now, let's say that gun is used in a gun crime, and the detective says, hey, ATF, who bought this gun? Here's a serial number. It takes them days, weeks, months, sometimes they can never find the registration form for that firearm. Meanwhile, that criminal is out committing more crimes. Now, we built a system that we're able to look at these forms, read the handwriting, and quickly identify whether this form, or through the 700 million forms, which form matches an ongoing investigation. So we can get those bad guys quicker and not violate privacy laws, which would eliminate the use of a database. So we're using a real-time AI technology that looks at a form, can read it quickly, and forget about it, and doesn't store any information about that user.
Okay, so Ethan, I have to ask you, it's 2020. I mean, we're sending, obviously rocket ships up to space. We have, we've got scooters that you can go faster than cars with. We got lots of technology. This seems like, duh, why wasn't this already created? There's an app for, I would think, this at this stage, but there's not. Why is the ATF not caught up with the technology?
Well, when you look at the laws, they're not allowed to create a database, and certain things is not their fault. They can't create a database of these firearms. They cannot create a registration. That's a good thing. A firearm owner should have their privacy. The issue is that when you have an army of people in the federal government searching all day, and they have hundreds of agents looking for these forms for ongoing investigations, I believe that if you were to introduce an effective technology, if you're a big agency and you want to have a big budget, that's a bad thing. It's not good to create technologies that would potentially save thousands of lives, but then eliminate jobs in the government. It's the big government, I think, that's stopping us.
Well, I'm okay.
Complicating the move to next-generation mobile standards is pressure from the U.S. not to use Huawei hardware. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, meeting in Brussels with EU counterparts, called security warnings groundless and politically motivated and suggested they were designed to discredit Huawei. Up to now, wireless network operators in the EU could decide themselves whose technology they use. But in some countries in the bloc, the debate is growing about how to restrict the use of equipment from non-European companies that could pose a risk to critical infrastructure, and that could affect Huawei.
20 U.S. states, including the District of Columbia, are suing over a federal regulation involving 3D printed guns. More specifically, this group is upset that the Trump administration recently loosened regulations on so-called ghost guns, which will ultimately allow easy access to these weapons online.
3D gun files are blueprints found online revealing how to build a firearm with a 3D printer. And now there's controversy circulating over whether these files are protected by the First Amendment. But it's not the first time lawmakers have fought against this very issue. California, Washington, and 17 other states, as well as D.C., are challenging a federal regulation which enabled the publication of 3D gun files to be posted online. The lawsuit is rekindling the same debate over whether these files are a risk to society.
I'm for folks that are 2A or pro 2A that want to build their own stuff. They may be tired of buying off-the-shelf firearms and they want to do something that's custom.
Jonathan Solomon, president of Redstone Firearms in Burbank, California, says while he sees both sides to the story here, this information for 3D gun files is nothing new.
It's been out there for a while. It's been out there before the mainstream media picked it up. So I don't want to say it's been on the dark web, but it's been out there for at least 10 plus years.
Solomon points out these files won't stop criminals from illegally obtaining or making a firearm.
If a criminal wants to get a hold of a firearm, they're going to get a hold of a firearm, period.
The Trump administration published rules last week transferring the regulation of 3D printed guns from the State Department to the Commerce Department. This in turn could open the door to making these blueprints available online. Back in July, the Department of Justice reached a settlement with Cody Wilson of Defense Distributed. After his site went black, Wilson and his legal counsel were able to prove the DOJ had violated his First and Second Amendment rights.
It doesn't work that way in the United States, that if someone creates something, wants to share something, that they first have to ask the government. There's no workable regulatory regime that can pass constitutional scrutiny that way.
But now, according to his website, his license has been vacated from the State Department. He's now awaiting the appeals window to the Ninth Circuit.